After 25 years of marriage, I bought my wife a sapphire necklace. Hours later, I heard her whispering with my son-in-law about selling my $20 million empire. They thought I was a fool. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers, it comes from your own home. If you believe no builder of family or fortune should be called a fool, leave a comment. And if these stories move you, subscribe for more. The late afternoon sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows from the steel skeletons of the new downtown high-rise. My hands felt permanently molded to the shape of the steering wheel. A familiar ache after a 10-hour day of walking sites and negotiating with subcontractors. It was a good ache. The kind of tired that comes from building something real, something that will outlast you. On the passenger seat, nestled in a plush velvet box, was a sapphire necklace. Its deep blue color reminded me of Margaret's eyes on our honeymoon in Greece. All those years ago, just last week, we'd celebrated our 25th anniversary. She'd given me a beautiful, heartfelt card. Here's to another 25 happy years. My love. She'd written in her elegant script. I smiled, the tired lines around my eyes softening. 25 years. We'd built a life, a family, an empire. From a two-man operation with a rusty pickup truck to one of the biggest construction firms in the state. We'd done it together. Lost in thought, I took a detour. A habit of mine, driving through the quieter suburban streets of Oak Creek to clear my head before getting home. The houses here were large and stately, set back on manicured lawns, the kind of neighborhood people aspired to, the kind of neighborhood my daughter, Brianna, and her husband, Eric, now lived in, thanks to a generous down payment I'd provided as a wedding gift. That's when I saw it. Parked on the street, gleaming under a sycamore tree whose leaves were just beginning to turn gold, was a silver Lexus, Margaret's Lexus. My foot eased off the gas pedal, the truck slowing to a crawl. The car was supposed to be in our garage. Margaret was supposed to be at her weekly book club meeting across town. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. It was the same feeling I got right before a big deal was about to go south, an instinct honed over decades that something was fundamentally wrong. I pulled over a block away, the engine rumbling to a stop, and the sudden silence felt heavy, ominous. I got out and walked back. The quiet suburban street, suddenly feeling hostile, its perfect lawns and cheerful mailboxes hiding something ugly. I kept to the shadows of the manicured hedges, my work boots silent on the thick, soft grass. The living room window of their colonial-style house was slightly ajar, letting the cool evening air in. I could hear their voices, clear as a bell in the twilight stillness. My wife's and my son-in-law's. I don't know why I did it. It wasn't a conscious thought. It was a reflex. A businessman's instinct to document everything. My hand moved on its own, pulling my phone from my pocket. My thumb finding the voice recorder app and pressing the red button. I held it close to the opening. My body pressed flat against the rough, unforgiving brick of the house. It's all lined up, Eric was saying, his voice thick with a smug satisfaction that made my skin crawl. The lawyer said, once the old man signs the post-nup amendment, it's a done deal. We can file for divorce the next day. He won't suspect a thing. Darling. Margaret's voice. The voice that had whispered loving words in my ear for a quarter of a century, replied. It was smooth as silk, and just as cold. I've played the doting, supportive wife perfectly for the last 2 years. He thinks I'm just helping him organize his finances. He's too busy building his precious empire to notice anything. my breath caught in my throat. A painful, ragged thing. Post-nup amendment, divorce. The words were a foreign language, describing a reality I couldn't comprehend. Eric laughed. A short, ugly sound that had no humor in it. And then we get it all. The construction company is valued at $12 million, plus the real estate portfolio. The villa. The investments. It's got to be close to $20 million. $20 million. The number hung in the air. Obscene. I felt the blood drain from my face. A cold rush that left me dizzy. My entire life's work, summed up as a jackpot they were about to hit. He earned it, Margaret said, and for a wild, "Espérate second," I felt a surge of hope. Then she continued, her voice laced with a bitterness I'd never heard before. And now it's our turn to enjoy it. I've put in my time. I'm not going to spend my golden years watching him play with blueprints and entertain concrete suppliers. I leaned my head against the brick, the rough texture digging into my skin, grounding me. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs, so loud I was sure they could hear it. I could feel the vibrations in my fingertips as I held the phone steady. I listened as they talked, their voices weaving a tapestry of deceit that covered every memory I held dear. They discussed selling my company, buying a yacht, moving to Europe. It was a fantasy built on the ashes of my life. The worst part was the casual cruelty, the complete lack of any emotion other than greed. Then, Eric delivered the final, crushing blow, his voice dripping with a contempt that was almost casual. Charles will never see it coming. The man is too trusting. A complete fool. A fool. The word slammed into me with physical force. I had to clench my jaw to keep from crying out. I, who could read a 500-page contract and find the single loophole, who could stare down the most ruthless union bosses, was a fool in my own home. I stayed there, pressed against the wall, for what felt like an eternity. The phone in my hand, a silent, digital witness, recording every poisonous word. The recording ticked past 15 minutes. I had more than enough. I had to get out of there before I shattered that window and tore their world apart with my bare hands. I pushed myself off the wall and began to back away, moving silently, my mind a screaming void. I was almost to the sidewalk when the front door swung open, and there they were, frozen in the doorway, bathed in the warm, welcoming light from the house. Margaret and Eric, their smiles vanished, replaced by masks of pure, unadulterated shock. Margaret recovered first. A true professional in the art of deception. Charles, honey, what on earth are you doing here? Her voice was a pitch-perfect imitation of surprised delight. Eric just stared, his face pale, his eyes darting from my face to my hands, as if searching for a weapon. He looked like a cornered animal. The survival instincts that had served me well in boardrooms and on construction sites took over. End of 1990. I forced my face into a neutral expression. I summoned a tired smile from some deep, hidden reserve. Just finished up at the new Henderson site, I said, my voice sounding unnervingly normal, even to my own ears. It's just a few blocks from here. Thought I'd swing by and see if you two wanted to grab a bite to eat. The lie came easily, smoothly. I was a builder. I knew how to construct a facade. Oh, Margaret said, her hand fluttering to her chest in a gesture of what looked like relief. What a lovely thought, we were just heading out ourselves. My eyes flickered past them, into the living room. On the coffee table, I saw a stack of thick, professionally bound documents with the logo of a law firm I didn't recognize. The foreshadowing was a punch to the gut. They weren't just planning. They were executing. "Well, some other time then," I said, giving them a small, dismissive wave. "Don't let me keep you." I turned and walked back to my truck, my back rigid. I could feel their eyes on me, dissecting my every move, searching for any crack in my performance. I didn't look back. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb, my movements measured and calm. I drove for a full block before my hands started to shake uncontrollably, and I had to pull over, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The drive home was a blur. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something cold and heavy that settled in the pit of my stomach. The city lights smeared past the windows. Every memory of the last 25 years replayed in my mind. But now they were tainted, warped. Our wedding in 1987. The birth of Brianna. The family vacations where I worked on my laptop every night, thinking I was building a secure future for us. That anniversary card from last week. Another 25 happy years. It was all a lie. A long, elaborate, soul-crushing lie. I realized the change in Margaret had started 2 years ago. Right after we landed the $50 million airport contract, my biggest professional triumph had been the catalyst for her ultimate betrayal. My success hadn't brought her joy, it had just raised the stakes of her greed. I finally pulled into my own driveway. The house. Our house, with its warm lights and familiar silhouette, looked like a stranger's. I sat in the truck for a long time. The engine off. The silence pressing in. My eyes fell on the velvet box on the passenger seat. The sapphire necklace, a gift for a woman who didn't exist. In my hand? My phone felt as heavy as a block of lead. It held 43 minutes of audio, 43 minutes of truth. They thought I was a pawn in their game, a fool who didn't understand the rules. But they had forgotten something. I wasn't the pawn. I was the one who had built the entire board. I walked into the house and went straight to my study, closing the heavy oak doors behind me. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat down in my leather chair in the darkness, the city glowing through the large window. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't call a friend. I opened the recording app, found the file, and pressed play. I listened to the whole thing, every word a fresh cut. When it finished, I didn't delete it. I pressed play again. And again, the pain was still there. A rough, gaping wound. But with each listening, something else began to grow in its place. A cold, hard clarity, a builder's precision. They had drawn up their blueprints. Now, it was time for me to draw up mine. Sleep was a luxury. I couldn't afford that night. I sat in my study until the first hint of dawn painted the sky gray, the city lights below slowly extinguishing one by one. I didn't listen to the recording again. I didn't need to. Every word was seared into my brain. Instead, I thought. I planned. I dismantled my life in my mind, examined each piece for its strengths and weaknesses, and began to reassemble it into something new, something fortified. The next morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee when Margaret came downstairs. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair perfectly coiffed even after a night's sleep. She looked beautiful, and for a moment, the ache in my chest was so intense I thought I might fold. Then I remembered her voice on the recording, cold and calculating. And the ache turned to ice. "Good morning, darling," she said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume was a familiar, expensive scent, Today, it smelled like deceit. You were so quiet coming to bed last night. I didn't even hear you. Had some work to finish up, I said, handing her a mug of coffee. My hand was perfectly steady. Big day today. Oh, she asked, a flicker of keen interest in her eyes. Anything exciting? Just the usual fires to put out. I said vaguely. We stood in a comfortable silence for a moment. The kind of silence married couples share. But now it was a lie. A vacuum filled with everything I knew and everything she was hiding. It was the last normal morning we would ever have. And only one of us knew it. The moment her Lexus pulled out of the driveway, headed for what she called a yoga retreat. But what I suspected was another strategy session with Eric. I was on the phone. I didn't call my friends. I didn't call my family. I called the one man who knew my business as well as I did. The one man I had trusted with my finances for 2 decades. Marcus, I said when he answered, my voice low and urgent. Cancel your morning. Get to my study. Use the private entrance through the garden. And Marcus, I added, tell no one you're coming here. There was no hesitation on his end. On my way. Charles. An hour later, my study had been transformed. The grand, quiet room where I reviewed blueprints and signed multi-million-dollar deals was now a war room. Marcus, a small, meticulous man with eyes that missed nothing, sat opposite me at my large oak desk. He looked concerned, his brow furrowed. Charles, you look like you haven't slept in a week. What's going on? I didn't answer. I simply unlocked my phone, placed it on the polished surface of the desk between us, and pressed play. I watched his face as he listened. I saw the initial confusion give way to disbelief, then to a deep, simmering anger. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the arms of his chair. He was a quiet man, but he was fiercely loyal. When Margaret's voice spoke of playing the doting wife, his jaw tightened. When Eric called me a fool, Marcus closed his eyes, a pained expression on his face, as if he'd been struck himself. When the 43-minute recording finally ended, he was silent for a full minute, staring at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Finally, he looked at me, his eyes blazing with a protective fury. The ungrateful, treacherous, he cut himself off, taking a deep, steadying breath. The professional accountant, wrestling back control. He was all business now. Okay, what's our first move? Our first move, I said, my voice devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me, is to know the battlefield. I want a complete, top-to-bottom audit of every asset, every account, every investment, including the private ones Margaret doesn't know about, and I want to know everything about them. I want to know Eric's debt down to the last penny, and I want to see every charge Margaret has made on her credit cards for the last 2 years. Marcus was already pulling his laptop from his bag, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm on it. As he worked, the numbers and figures filling the screen. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Brianna's face, smiling in a photo from our last family vacation. My heart sized. This was the part I dreaded most. Hi, Dad, she said, her voice small and worried. Is everything okay? I saw Mom's car at our place yesterday. And then you showed up. And at dinner last night, Mom was acting weird. She seemed on edge. Is there something going on between you two? I had to close my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. The innocence in her voice was a physical pain. I had to protect her, Not just from them, but from this knowledge, for as long as I could. "Hey, sweetie," I said, forcing a warm, reassuring tone into my voice. "Everything's fine. Your mother and I are just a little stressed with work. You know how it gets. Nothing for you to worry about." "Are you sure?" she pressed, unconvinced. "It just feels tense." "I'm sure." I lied, and the word tasted like ash in my mouth. "I promise. Everything is going to be okay." After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone. The weight of that lie heavy in my gut. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about saving my daughter from the wreckage that was to come. "I've got something," Marcus said, his voice grim. He turned the laptop toward me. "Eric. He's in deep. Looks like he tried to play day trader with some tech stocks and got wiped out. He's got over $200,000 in personal loans and credit card debt. And he's been making minimum payments on all of it." He clicked another window open. "And Margaret, Charles. Her spending is out of control. $5,000 handbags. Spa days that cost more than a mortgage payment. A long weekend in Paris last month that she charged to a card you probably forgot existed. It's all here. She's been living like a queen on a spending spree." It all clicked into place. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. That desperation made them dangerous. But it also made them predictable. That evening, I saw just how dangerous. I was in the study when Margaret came in. She was holding the stack of legal documents I had seen at Eric's house, now tucked into an elegant leather portfolio. She placed them on my desk with a practiced, casual air. "Darling," she said, her voice a soft purr. "My financial advisor drew these up. It's just a simple power of attorney amendment. It will allow me to help you manage some of the smaller investment accounts. You're so busy. I thought it would take some of the load off your shoulders." I picked up the papers. My hands didn't shake. I scanned the dense legal text, my eyes picking out phrases like full authority and unrestricted access. It wasn't a simple amendment. It was a document that would give her significant control over our joint assets. It was the key she needed to unlock my empire. The next day, Marcus and I were sitting in a glass-walled conference room on the 50th floor of a downtown skyscraper. The office belonged to Laura Bennett. She wasn't just a divorce lawyer. She was a corporate executioner who specialized in high-net-worth dissolutions. She was sharp, dressed in a steel gray suit, and had an unnerving stillness about her that made you feel like you were being X-rayed. We laid out the situation. I told her the story, and Marcus provided the financial data. Then, I placed my phone on the table and played the recording. She listened intently, her face betraying new emotion, her eyes fixed on the phone. When it was over, she didn't offer condolences. She leaned forward, a predatory gleam in her eyes, and a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Mr. Charles," she said, her voice a low, precise instrument. "Most of my clients come to me with suspicions. You've come to me with a signed confession." She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the silent phone. "This isn't going to be a divorce. This is going to be a demolition." We spent the next 3 hours mapping out the strategy. Laura sketched out a plan on a whiteboard. A series of moves and countermoves that was as complex and elegant as any building I had ever designed. We would create irrevocable trusts for Brianna, moving key assets legally out of Margaret's reach. We would perform a forensic audit that would trace every dollar Margaret had spent. We would prepare the divorce filing, but we would not file it. Not yet. We control the timeline, Laura said, her eyes fixed on me. We let them think their plan is working. We let them get more confident, more careless. And then, when they least expect it, we strike. I walked out of that office feeling a strange sense of calm. The pain was still there. A dull, heavy stone in my gut. But now, it was accompanied by a cold, clear sense of purpose. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist. That night, I came home to find Margaret waiting for me in the study. The legal documents were still on my desk, right where she'd left them. She had a beautiful, expensive fountain pen resting on top of them. A silent invitation. "Did you have a chance to look over those papers?" "Honey?" she asked, her voice soft and inviting. She came up behind my chair, her hands resting on my shoulders. I could feel the warmth of her touch through my shirt. It was the touch of a stranger. I looked at the documents. I looked at the pen. Then I looked up at her, into the eyes of the woman who had shared my bed for 25 years. And I smiled. A slow, easy smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I have," I said, "and I think you're right. It's time I let you help out more." A look of triumphant relief washed over her face. So potent, it was almost vulgar. She thought she had won. She thought the fool was finally ready to hand over the keys to the kingdom. Her hand squeezed my shoulders gently. "Oh, darling, I'm so glad you see it that way. It will make everything so much simpler." "Simpler is good," I agreed, pushing the papers away with the back of my hand. "But you know, Marcus, he's a stickler for details. He insists on reviewing every comma and clause before I sign anything. Says it's just standard procedure for documents of this nature. Especially with our portfolio being so complex." I let out a weary sigh. The perfect picture of a man burdened by his own success. He'll have his notes for me in a day or two. The flicker of impatience was back in her eyes. But she couldn't argue. To do so would be to reveal her haste. "Of course, darling, whatever Marcus thinks is best, we wouldn't want to rush these things." She was playing the part of the reasonable, helpful wife. I was playing the part of the busy, trusting husband. The curtain was up on the first act of our final performance. The next few days were a quiet storm of activity. By day, I was at my downtown office, which had become a fortress. We worked with a speed and precision that came from years of managing complex construction projects. Laura's team drafted the paperwork for an irrevocable trust, a legal vault designed to protect a significant portion of my assets for Brianna. It was a complex, ironclad structure that, once created, could not be undone. It was the financial equivalent of pouring a foundation in reinforced concrete. Marcus, meanwhile, was a phantom, moving silently through my financial world, transferring funds, liquidating certain assets, and creating a detailed paper trail that would be our ammunition. By night, I was at home, playing my part. I was Charles, the devoted husband, discussing dinner plans and listening to Margaret's stories about her charity work. The hypocrisy was a bitter taste in my mouth, but I swallowed it down. Every polite nod, every feigned smile, was a move on the chessboard. That Friday, Eric and Brianna came over for our weekly family dinner. The tension was so thick I could have cut it with a steak knife. I had to sit there and watch Eric, this boy who was drowning in debt, talk about his brilliant new investment ideas with an authority he hadn't earned. I had to watch Margaret hang on his every word. The two of them, a united front of ambition and deceit, occasionally exchanging a look that screamed, "Soon." I played my part. I nodded. asked interested questions, and poured him another glass of my best scotch. "Charles, you should really get in on this," Eric said, his confidence buoyed by the alcohol. "It's a new tech startup. Ground floor. It's going to be huge." "Sounds interesting, son," I said, leaning forward and lowering my voice conspiratorially. "But I'm a bit tied up at the moment. In fact, I was going to talk to your mother about it tonight." I looked at Margaret, a twinkle in my eye. "I'm looking at a massive new project, a huge luxury resort development in Dubai. It's risky, but the potential payoff is astronomical." I saw it then, a spark that passed between Eric and Margaret. It was a look of pure, unadulterated greed. I had just dangled the juiciest bait imaginable, and they had taken it. Hook, line, and sinker. They believed a massive new influx of cash was on the horizon, which would make their eventual prize even bigger. Their patience would be rewarded. The next Monday, I put the next phase of the plan into motion. I called the credit card company from my private office line. "Yes, I'd like to report some unusual activity," I said, my voice laced with practiced concern. "My wife's supplementary card has seen a huge spike in spending. With the large capital transfers I'm making for a new overseas project, I want to lock things down. Please lower the limit on her card to $1,000. Effective immediately." The explosion came 2 days later. I was in my study when Margaret stormed in, her face a mask of fury. She threw a handful of shopping bags from a lesser-known boutique on the floor. "Charles, what is the meaning of this? My card was declined at Neiman Marcus in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I looked up from my work with an expression of mild surprise. "Declined? That's odd. Let me check." I pretended to type on my computer for a moment, then frowned. A performance of dawning realization. It seems I put a temporary hold on the account. Darling, I'm so sorry. With all the money I'm moving for the Dubai project, the bank's fraud department must have flagged your spending. I had to lower the limit to protect us. It's just a temporary measure until the deal is finalized." She stared at me, her chest heaving. She was trapped. To argue against the spending limit would be to argue against the mythical Dubai project, the source of their future windfall. Temporary, she finally spat out, the word dripping with venom. "Of course, honey," I said soothingly. "As soon as the ink is dry, you can have any limit you want. This is for our future." She left the room, still fuming. But her anger was now mixed with the greedy anticipation I had so carefully cultivated. The financial noose was tightening. The inevitable, painful confrontation with Brianna happened that weekend. She came over alone, her eyes red-rimmed. "Dad, you have to tell me what's going on," she pleaded, sitting across from me in the living room that now felt like a stage. "Mom is furious all the time. You're barely speaking. This isn't just work stress. Are you and Mom getting a divorce?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Lying to my daughter was the hardest part of this entire charade. I took her hands in mine. They felt small and cold. "Sweetie," I said, my voice thick with an emotion that was all too real. "Your mother and I are going through a difficult time. It's complicated, but I need you to trust me. I am handling it, and no matter what happens, you will always be protected. I promise you that." It was all I could give her, a half-truth wrapped in a promise. She cried, and I held her. feeling like the worst father in the world. But I knew, with a certainty that burned in my gut, that this temporary pain was nothing compared to the devastation she would face if I let their plan succeed. To feed their impatience, I left a trail of breadcrumbs. I had Marcus draft a series of fake emails from a fictional Dubai investment group, complete with impressive-looking financial projections and legal jargon. One afternoon, when I knew Eric was coming over to borrow my lawnmower, I left my laptop open on the kitchen counter. One of the emails displayed prominently on the screen. I went out into the garage to look for a wrench, giving him a full 5 minutes alone with it. When I came back in, he was standing exactly where I had left him, but his eyes had a feverish, greedy shine. He had taken the bait. The pressure was working. I could feel it. Margaret became more insistent about the power of attorney papers, leaving them on my desk every night. Eric started calling me with his own helpful investment advice, trying to get a clearer picture of my finances. Their desperation was making them sloppy. The final pieces were moved into place during a meeting with Laura. The trusts for Brianna were legally established and funded. The forensic audit from Marcus was complete. A multi-page document detailing every extravagant purchase Margaret had made. The divorce petition was drafted, citing irreconcilable differences, and ready to be filed at a moment's notice. All we needed was the right venue to bring the curtain down. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala, I said, and Laura's lips curved into a slow, appreciative smile. It's next Saturday. It's Margaret's biggest social event of the year. She's the chair of the committee. She'll be on stage, giving a speech. Perfect, Laura said, her voice purring with satisfaction. There's nothing like a little public theater. The night before the gala, the house was filled with a strange, electric tension. Margaret was in a state of high excitement, directing the caterers and florists for the pre-party we were hosting. I was a ghost in my own home, observing the preparations for a celebration that felt like a funeral. Later that evening, she came into my study. She was wearing the gown she had chosen for the event, a shimmering, backless creation of dark blue silk that must have cost a fortune. The sapphire necklace I had bought for our anniversary, the one still sitting in its box in my desk drawer, would have matched it perfectly. She struck a pose in the doorway, a vision of confidence and beauty. "Well?" she asked, a radiant smile on her face. "How do I look?" "You look stunning, Margaret," I said. And it was the truth. She was a beautiful woman, a beautiful, venomous snake. "Tomorrow night is going to be a huge success," she said, gliding into the room. "We'll raise a record amount for the hospital. It's so important for us to maintain our image, for the business." I looked at her, at this stranger who wore my wife's face, who had spent years plotting my downfall while sleeping next to me. The pain was still there, but it was a distant, cold thing now. The time for pain was over. The time for justice was about to begin. "Yes, my dear," I said, my voice as smooth and calm as a frozen lake. "It's going to be a night no one will ever forget." The night of the gala arrived wrapped in a cloak of cool autumn air and flashing camera bulbs. The grand ballroom of the city's most historic hotel was a sea of tuxedos, glittering gowns, and the murmur of 100 conversations fueled by champagne. Margaret was in her element, a queen holding court. She moved through the crowd with a practiced grace, her hand resting lightly on my arm. A portrait of the perfect, powerful couple. I played my part, smiling, shaking hands, my mind a cold, quiet machine counting down the minutes. Every smile I returned, every polite laugh I offered, felt like a betrayal of the rage that was coiled in my gut. Brianna and Eric were there. Of course, Brianna looked beautiful but anxious, her eyes constantly flitting between me and her mother. Eric, on the other hand, was practically vibrating with smug confidence. He saw himself as the heir apparent, the man who had outsmarted the old lion. He clapped me on the back. A little too hard. Big night. "Charles," he said, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey, "Margaret is going to knock 'em dead." I just smiled. He had no idea how right he was. The dinner service ended. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight found Margaret as she walked to the podium on stage. The room fell into a respectful silence. I stood just off to the side of the stage, in the wings, exactly as a proud husband should. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice resonating with a warmth and sincerity that made my stomach turn. She spoke eloquently about the importance of community, of giving back, of helping those in need. Then, she turned her speech to a more personal note. "None of this," she said, her voice catching with practiced emotion as she gestured vaguely in my direction, "would be possible without the foundation of a strong family. A family built on love, trust, and unwavering support." The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost breathtaking. The crowd, full of the city's most influential people, was captivated. They applauded politely. "And at the heart of that family," she continued, her eyes finding mine across the stage, "is my husband, Charles, a man of integrity, a man I am so proud to stand beside." This was it, the moment we had planned. As the applause swelled, I didn't move. Instead, another man did. A man in a plain, unremarkable suit, who had been standing near the back of the ballroom. He walked up the side steps to the stage with a calm, deliberate pace. He was a process server, and he was walking directly toward my wife. The applause began to falter as people noticed the unexpected addition to the stage. Margaret's smile froze, a look of confusion on her face. The man didn't say a word. He simply reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick legal envelope, and placed it on the podium directly in front of her. "Margaret Hayes," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, but amplified by the microphone she had just been using. "You have been served." A collective gasp went through the ballroom. You could have heard a pin drop. The silence was absolute, a vacuum of shock. Margaret stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. Her face, which had been a picture of poised charity, was now a canvas of pale, dawning horror. But I wasn't finished. I stepped forward from the wings, into the spotlight, and walked to the podium. I stood beside my wife, close enough to see the terror in her eyes. I picked up the microphone. "I apologize for this interruption," I said, my voice calm and steady, echoing through the silent hall. "But my wife mentioned the importance of trust and family, and I feel it's important for you all, our friends and colleagues, to understand the full context of that statement." I looked out at the sea of stunned faces. I saw Brianna, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. I saw Eric, his smug expression having evaporated, replaced by a look of pure panic. "You see," I continued, "my wife and I have had some disagreements lately about the future of our assets, and to clear up any confusion, I thought it would be best to let you hear her thoughts directly." I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had given a copy of the audio file to the event's sound technician, a man my company had worked with for years. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. And then it began. The sound of Eric's smug voice filled the grand ballroom. "It's all lined up," the lawyer said. "Once the old man signs the post-nup amendment, it's a done deal." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Then came Margaret's voice, cold and clear. "He won't suspect a thing. Darling, I've played the doting, supportive wife perfectly for the last 2 years." The murmurs turned to gasps. People were turning to look at each other, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Margaret made a small, strangled sound beside me. The recording continued. On. Indicted. Undeniable testament to their treachery. The discussion of my $20 million empire, the plans for a life of luxury built on my ruin, and then the final, echoing nail in their coffin, Eric's contemptuous laugh, followed by the words that had haunted me for weeks. "Charles will never see it coming. The man is too trusting. A complete fool." In the dead silence that followed that line, Margaret swayed on her feet. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed onto the stage in a heap of dark blue silk. A few people screamed. Eric, his face ashen, turned and tried to push his way through the stunned crowd. A rat fleeing a sinking ship. But 2 of the hotel's security guards, whom Laura had arranged to be on standby, quietly stepped into his path. I looked down at the woman on the floor, the stranger who had destroyed 25 years of my life. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a vast, empty sadness. I placed the microphone carefully back on its stand, turned away from the chaos, and walked off the stage. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Just as Laura had predicted, the divorce was finalized in record time, with the recording as irrefutable evidence of conspiracy and fraud. Margaret was left with nothing but what she had brought into the marriage 25 years ago, which wasn't much. Her social standing was obliterated overnight. The queen of the charity circuit became a pariah. Eric was ruined. His creditors, who had been patient as long as he was connected to me, descended like vultures. He was forced into bankruptcy. The hardest part was Brianna. The day after the gala, I sat with her in the quiet of my study. I didn't try to explain or justify. I just played the entire, unedited 43-minute recording for her. She sat there, silent, tears streaming down her face as she listened to the voices of her mother and her husband plotting to destroy her father. When it was over, she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she simply got up, came over to my chair, and wrapped her arms around me. She sobbed, and I held her. The 2 of us adrift in the wreckage of our family. Months passed. The seasons changed. I sold the grand, empty mansion that had become a monument to a lie. I bought a modern penthouse apartment downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city I had helped build. Brianna filed for divorce from Eric. She started coming over for dinner a few times a week. One evening, we were in my new kitchen, chopping vegetables together. The sound of our knives on the cutting board was a comfortable, rhythmic beat. She was telling me about a new job she was starting, a spark of her old self returning to her eyes. "I'm proud of you, sweetie," I told her, and I meant it. She stopped chopping and looked at me, her expression serious. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it." "It's not your fault," I said, putting my arm around her. "You saw what you wanted to see, a family. There's no shame in that. We stood there for a moment, the city lights twinkling below us. I had built an empire of steel and concrete, and it had almost been taken from me. But in the end, I realized what I had really been building. What truly mattered was something else entirely. It was the truth. It was my own self-respect. And it was this quiet moment with my daughter. A foundation that no one could ever take away. After 25 years of marriage, I bought my wife a sapphire necklace. Hours later, I heard her whispering with my son-in-law about selling my $20 million empire. They thought I was a fool.